Okay, so generating solar energy is becoming incredibly easy and accessible, right? But here is the defining paradox of our energy transition. Physically and financially integrating all that clean power into our daily lives is still a massive bottleneck. Think about it for a second. Why is it so unbelievably complex to just plug clean, abundant, literally free solar power into our existing electrical infrastructure? I mean, on paper, it sounds like child's play. But in reality, if you look at the sustainability accounting standards for solar developers, it's a monumental challenge. So in this explainer, we're going to quickly run through the integration challenge, the technical grid barriers, how technology tries to stabilize things, the energy policies driving profitability, and finally, the future of our infrastructure. Let's dive in. Section 1, the integration challenge. I want you to picture a dynamic electrical grid that is constantly oscillating. On one hand, you get these massive peaks of solar production right in the middle of the day. But wait, at that exact same time, human energy consumption actually drops because most people are away at work or school. This dissynchronization creates some serious instability. Basically, the grid just gets slammed with a massive injection of energy right when it needs it the least. But despite this physical chaos, businesses are still pushing really hard for solar integration. And their motivations make total sense. We're talking long-term economic advantages, keeping up with strict environmental regulations, and avoiding the crazy volatility of fossil fuel prices. Plus, let's be honest, a company's brand image today is hugely tied to its visible climate commitments. Which brings us to Section 2, technical grid barriers. This is where we hit a massive physical wall, and it introduces a severe technical risk known as curtailment. Imagine your solar panels are running at full capacity, doing their job, producing perfectly clean power. But the local grid is completely saturated, so the grid operator literally forces the solar farm to disconnect or ramp down. The result? Perfectly usable, clean energy is just thrown away because our legacy infrastructure simply lacks the capacity to absorb it. It's wild, but it happens all the time. And honestly, curtailment is just the tip of the iceberg. Large-scale adoption faces some very specific hardware obstacles. There's extremely limited transmission connectivity. Massive solar projects often can't even access the high-capacity lines they need to move power from, say, a sunny desert to a busy city. Throw in a massive administrative headache with interconnection standards that vary wildly from place to place, plus incredibly strict requirements for inverters, and you've got major roadblocks stopping projects from ever turning on. Ultimately, the core challenge really boils down to this. The sun does not shine on command. Clouds roll in. Night falls. That natural variability is the ultimate enemy of our aging, rigid power systems, which were built decades ago for coal or nuclear plants to provide a constant, totally predictable stream of power. All right, Section 3, stabilizing with technology. So, how do we fix this? Developers are deploying some fascinating technological solutions to smooth out those aggressive peaks and valleys. Step 1, smart inverters. Instead of just dumbly converting energy, these actually communicate with the grid to adjust the flow and stabilize voltage in real time. Step 2 is the real game changer, battery storage. It's a beautifully simple concept. Store that excess midday sunshine and discharge it at 7 p.m. when everyone is home turning on their TVs. And step 3, microgrids. These are localized systems that can operate entirely on their own, safely cutting ties with the main grid when things get too strained. But hardware alone won't save us. Companies are having to innovate their business models too, specifically to drive down the levelized cost of energy. They're aggressively trimming soft costs, things like financing, leasing, and customer acquisition. And even more cleverly, they're using contractual innovations. They use power purchase agreements that include curtailment caps. Basically, developers are legally transferring the financial risk of that wasted energy over to other parties, making these massive projects financially viable even when the physical grid lets them down. Moving to Section 4, energy policies and profitability. Because the solar market isn't just about sunlight and silicon. Macro policy plays a huge, unavoidable role. Direct and indirect government subsidies can literally launch an entire industry overnight. Conversely, international trade disputes and tariffs can freeze active projects dead in their tracks. Meanwhile, things like renewable portfolio standards, which legally force utility companies to provide a minimum percentage of green energy, create this guaranteed baseline of demand that the industry relies on.
These broad policies trickle down into exact financial levers that directly influence the profitability of a project. On the monetization side, policies like net metering let users sell surplus energy back to the grid, which entirely changes the math for developers. Then you have feed-in tariffs and priority dispatch, ensuring that clean power gets bought first. On the financing side, structures like investment tax credits are often the literal deciding factor in whether a multi-million-dollar solar farm actually gets built or goes bankrupt. These are the absolute bedrock of the modern solar business model.
Now, it is important to note that when we talk about regulatory barriers, it's not just pointless red tape. As the source material for this explainer points out, policymakers are legitimately concerned. They're looking at the colossal costs of managing grid disruptions and all that wasted energy from curtailment, and they are writing rules to protect the overall stability and affordability of the broader electrical system. It's a really delicate balancing act. Finally, Section 5, the future of our infrastructure. Here is the hard truth. Workarounds like batteries and smart inverters are amazing, but they only take us so far. The ultimate solution? We have to entirely replace our aging generation and transmission infrastructure. We're talking about planning transmission networks on a massive regional scale. We need highly interconnected, high-capacity networks capable of moving clean power from the sunniest deserts to high-demand urban centers instantly, without losing power along the way. We are talking about an infrastructure overhaul on a generational scale. Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to wrap up this explainer. We are in the middle of a high-stakes race. On one side, the unstoppable momentum of solar adoption. On the other, the stubborn, rigid limits of our legacy power grids. So, will our aging infrastructure manage to catch up to the solar revolution? Or will we have to force battery tech and tax policies to evolve at breakneck speeds just to compensate? It is absolutely the defining energy challenge of our decade. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep an eye on how this space evolves.